Is it time to defund the police? In the case of the Capitol Hill police, I believe the answer is, in fact, yes. So defund the Capitol Police. That's my hashtag for the present. Now, why? Well, because the Capitol Police are showing themselves increasingly to be A, chronic liars, B, chronic haters of Republicans, and C, completely in bed with Nancy Pelosi. Now, I immediately regret using that image because the concept of being in bed with Nancy Pelosi is indeed terrifying. But nevertheless, these Capitol Hill police are not to be trusted. And the classic example of this, if you listen to their January 6th testimony one after the other, you realize that it was lie upon lie upon lie. And the telling signal of this was the way that they presented the death of Brian Sicknick. In a sense, they recycled the original lie that Brian Sicknick was killed by Trump supporters. Now, they couldn't recycle the original lie in its original form. He was hit on the head with a fire extinguisher. By the way, they're quite likely the people who put out that lie in the first place, because when the New York Times reported it, they cited unnamed officials. Officials from where? Well, probably from the Capitol Police. But now, appearing before Congress, they used the word homicide to talk about Sicknick. He was killed by, quote, homicidal Trump supporters. Except that this was a completely made-up account. The Capitol Police have repeatedly been pushing out this line. In fact, when two men were arrested for spraying Sicknick with a chemical irritant, bear spray, the Capitol Police cheered the news. They said that the officer, Sicknick, was, quote, injured while protecting Congress during the riot at the U.S. Capitol. Now, that's not true. Even when the fire extinguisher lie collapsed, the Capitol Police pushed a new lie, which is that Sicknick died because of bear spray, that he suffered a fatal allergic reaction to bear spray. And then, quote, after the attack, he, Sicknick, was taken to a hospital where he succumbed to his injuries on the evening of January 7th, end quote. Except there were no injuries. And all of this has now been thoroughly documented. An autopsy was done on Sicknick. The medical examiner released a report. No injuries. In fact, the report concluded Sicknick died of, quote, natural causes. The meaning of that is that Sicknick would have died anyway. And even after he died, the Capitol Police, continuing in their tradition of habitual lying, acting Capitol Police Chief Yogananda Pittman told the Senate Appropriations Committee 2 days after the medical examiner's report that, quote, the January 6th protest, quote, resulted in the death of Officer Sicknick, end quote. Now, when you begin to look at these Capitol Police guys, particularly the ones who testified, like Officer Harry Dunn, you see what a vicious Trump hater this guy is. In fact, he refers to Trump, quote, as a hitman, as if Trump is some kind of a hired assassin who didn't merely use irresponsible rhetoric that got people fired up and they went to the Capitol. Trump was actually some kind of an assassin himself, an assassin, I take it, of the democratic process. Earlier in his tweets, Harry Dunn has called Trump, quote, the racist in chief. So these aren't cops in the normal sense. They're ultimately a kind of militia operating at the behest of Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats. And that's why she was able to rustle them up. Hey, listen, I need you guys, I'm going to supply you with some scripts. You just basically read these lies out because we're trying to create a theater for the American people. Now, what can Republicans do? It turns out they can do something. Recently, Nancy Pelosi pushed through the House, but it barely passed the House by a hair, a $1.9 billion emergency appropriation bill. And this is full of nonsense. It gives, by the way, the Capitol Police the power to track people nationwide, supposedly to prevent future attacks on the Capitol, but it gives them surveillance powers on people living outside the Beltway, living in other states. Moreover, it has, quote, $4.4 million to help create a wellness and trauma support group. Really? $4.4 million for wellness and trauma support? This is outrageous. Now, the Republicans in the Senate are completely in a position to block this. And so this isn't really defunding the police. It's just not giving these habitual liars more money to wreak more harm on the American people. And the Republicans can finally do something. And all they have to do is come together and say no, just say no to this additional appropriation. And it can and should, and I hope will, be defeated.